Welcome to this quick dive into the Scandinavian Defense, a sharp opening with hidden traps. Whether you play it as white or black, you'll learn two deadly tricks to catch your opponent off guard and win fast. Let's jump in. Let's begin with one of the most well-known and instructive lines in the Scandinavian Defense. The opening starts with pawn to e4, pawn to d5, an immediate challenge from black against white's central control. White typically captures with pawn takes d5, and black responds with queen takes d5, activating the queen early in the game. White then plays knight to c3, developing a piece while attacking the queen and gaining valuable tempo. In response, black has several retreat options. The queen can fall back to a5 or d6, but in the most classical and traditional variation, it returns safely to d8, avoiding any future attacks and preparing to redeploy other pieces efficiently. White begins by asserting central dominance with the move d4, solidifying their control over the center of the board. In response, black challenges this grip by developing the knight to c6, directly targeting the d4 pawn and introducing early tension. White continues logical development with knight to f3, both reinforcing central control and laying the groundwork for a quick kingside castle. Black then plays a sharp move, bishop to g4, pinning the knight on f3 to the queen, and attacking the pawn on d4. This creates pressure on white's position and hints at aggressive intentions on the kingside in the coming moves. This variation may appear slow at first glance, but it sets the stage for sharp play, especially if white becomes overconfident. Black's seemingly quiet development hides aggressive ideas, tactical tricks, and counter-attacking opportunities that can punish any small inaccuracy. At this point, some players with the white pieces might feel a bit uncomfortable, especially if they're unfamiliar with this line. You might be tempted to play cautiously, for example, by playing bishop to a3, simply trying to solidify your structure. However, there's a much more assertive way to respond to black's pressure. Instead of staying passive, white can play pawn to d5, immediately challenging black. Now black will usually reply with knight to a5, taking advantage of the pin on the knight at f3 and threatening your center. It may seem that black is gaining the upper hand again, but this is where white can unleash a stunning tactical blow. White plays knight takes e5, seemingly sacrificing the queen in the process. If black accepts this and captures the queen, thinking they've won material, then white plays bishop to b5 with check, launching a powerful counterattack. At this critical moment, the only realistic way for black to shield their king from the check is by playing pawn to c6, using the pawn to block the check from white's bishop on b5. However, white can now simply capture with pawn takes c6, and the board transforms into a razor-sharp battlefield. Although black technically has an extra queen, their position is on the brink of collapse. The king stands exposed in the center, and white's pieces are perfectly placed to launch powerful threats. The key tactical motif here is the discovered check, which white can create by moving the bishop on b5, opening a direct line of attack from the rook on d1, or continuing pressure with the bishop itself. There are two especially crushing continuations for white. Pawn to c7, advancing the pawn to attack black's queen directly, while unleashing a discovered check that forces black into a hopeless situation. Pawn takes b7, capturing the pawn and threatening black's rook on a8, also delivering a discovered check that leaves black's king reeling. Both options lead to devastating consequences for black. The threats are so overwhelming that even if black tries to hold on, white will at least regain the lost material. And in most cases, white will emerge with a decisive material advantage, or even a winning attack. In the game we're examining, black tries a creative and unexpected idea, bishop to e2. At first glance, this move may look strange or even pointless, but there's hidden purpose behind it. Black is trying to lure white's bishop on b5 into making a capture, which would eliminate the powerful discovered check threat and allow black to escape the immediate danger. If white falls for the idea and plays bishop takes bishop on e2, the pressure is relieved and black is momentarily out of danger. However, the position takes an interesting tactical turn if white chooses to capture the bishop with knight takes e2 instead of the more obvious recapture. This seemingly simple move shifts the dynamics. Black now has a narrow but effective tactical resource, queen to a5 check. Not only does this check the white king, but it also puts immediate pressure on the unprotected bishop on b5. To parry the check, white is practically forced to play knight to c3, blocking the queen's path. With that tempo gained, black calmly plays castles kingside, finally achieving safety and relieving some of the earlier pressure. It's a clever defensive idea by black, showing that even in seemingly lost positions, there can be hidden tricks. But the margin for error is razor thin. One wrong move, and white's threats can become unstoppable. So although the move bishop to e2 may look strange at first, it's actually quite clever. It introduces a tactical resource and creates a small window for black to survive. That said, in the actual game, white played precisely. Instead of capturing the bishop with the knight, white simply captured it with the king, keeping the discovered check threat alive. And from that moment, the game quickly unraveled for black. Black tried pawn to a6, putting pressure on the bishop, but white responded with pawn to c7, attacking the queen and unleashing the discovered check. After the sequence of exchanges that followed, white emerged with an extra minor piece and a completely winning position. A really clever and resourceful sequence by white, turning black's early aggression into a tactical trap, and ultimately a dominant advantage. So, this is definitely a trap worth keeping in mind, and it works especially well if you're playing as white. Let's take a look at trap number 2 in the Scandinavian defense. It begins in familiar fashion. White plays pawn to a4, and black responds with pawn to d5, the Scandinavian defense. White captures the d5 pawn, and this time, we're going to focus on black's most popular reply, which is queen to a5. Now white continues development with knight to f3, and let's say black responds with bishop to g4. This is a common idea, especially among amateur players, who often like placing their light-squared bishop on g4 to pin the knight and create some discomfort in white's position. To counter this, white plays pawn to h3, trying to drive the bishop away. If black exchanges and white recaptures, then black develops further with knight to c6. What's black aiming for in this position? The plan is straightforward. The knight on c6 is eyeing the d4 square, where it can jump in and threaten both your queen and the pawn on c2. Black may also castle queenside, putting the rook on d8, which gives them a very active stance if white is too slow. Because of this, white needs to act fast, and luckily, there's an excellent way to take control. White now plays bishop to b5, putting pressure on black's knight on c6. The knight is now under attack from both the bishop and queen, and black must find a way to defend it. The only viable defense is queen to b6, which protects the knight and keeps the tension. But here comes the brilliant tactical shot that turns the game upside down. White plays knight to d5, a stunning sacrifice. Now let's break this down. If black captures your bishop on b5, then you follow up with knight takes c7, a deadly fork that attacks both the king and the queen. Once the king moves, you capture the queen, and that's game over. This is the core idea of the trap. But what if black tries something else to avoid the fork? Let's say black tries queen to a5, attempting to maintain pressure and keep control of the c7 square. Even then, white pushes pawn to b4, chasing the queen. Black is now in a bind. The knight on c6 is pinned, so it can't capture the b4 pawn. The queen must move again, and no matter where it goes, white can still play knight to c7, delivering the crushing fork. In short, there's no reliable way for black to escape this sequence. Either they lose the queen or get buried under pressure. This is a beautiful trap in the Scandinavian defense, combining tactical awareness with aggressive play, and it can catch your opponent completely off guard.